Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Next Generation Infrastructure and Cloud Services stage at CogX 2020, partnered with TechUK. My name is Sue Daley. I'm Associate Director for Technology and Innovation at TechUK, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your guide for all the amazing sessions that we have coming up on day 3 here at CogX 2020. It's brilliant that you're going to be with us, but remember, why not tell other people you're here? Tweet all the way through today using the hashtag CogX 2020. We have some great sessions coming up throughout the day. We're going to be talking about electronic vertical takeoff technology later on, the power of supercomputing, the data explosion that next generation infrastructure is really going to bring and whether we're ready. And also lots more through all our speakers and great panelists we have lined up. Kicking us off today, though, we have a panel focusing on whether we are ready for this revolution that is coming. Are we ready, our businesses and society ready for next generation infrastructure and what it really means to the UK? We've got a great panel coming up of speakers from IBM, UiPath, and the Science and Technology Facilities Council, but also a lot more to come during the day, so please stay with us. So it's my pleasure to introduce the first panel, and also, strangely, I can't introduce the moderator because it is actually me. So it's my pleasure to be welcoming the rest of the panel. We're going to be talking about whether we are ready for a revolution in next generation infrastructure, and got a great panel with me today. Gavin Jackson from UiPath, Jacqui Davey from IBM, and Mark Thomson from the Science and Technologies Facilities Council. So what we're talking about this morning is how do we prepare businesses and society for what this future is coming, a very perhaps undefined next generation infrastructure enabled digital future. What are the steps we need to put in place to realize this future and the potential, particularly as we look to our post-COVID recovery and future? What are the technologies that are really going to be playing a key role as we move forward? What are the opportunities and challenges, and how do we get this right moving forward? So it's I'm going to kick off with asking the panelists just to introduce themselves before we start the discussion. So to start off with, Jacqui Davey from IBM, great you could be with us. Perhaps just introduce yourself and your role at IBM. Please go ahead.
Jacqui Davey, and I have worked for IBM for over 30 years in a variety of roles. I joined actually as a secretary when I first joined, and I've been a mainframe programmer. I've worked in hardware sales, software sales, cloud services, and today I have the privilege of leading IBM's business with BP, one of our largest and most significant clients all around the world. So that's my role today. Thank you, Sue. And thank you for joining me and joining the panel. I'll hope to be more technically competent as we go through.
No, it's brilliant you're with us. Thank you. Mark, maybe over to you. Mark Thomson, please, could you tell us a bit more about yourselves?
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Executive Chair of the Science and Technology Facilities Councils, which is one of the 9 councils of UK research and innovation. So we're responsible for big science, basically particle physics, astrophysics, but also our large facilities, and that can mean things like synchrotrons, but also high performance computing as well. My background is I'm a professor of particle physics at the University of Cambridge. I've been dabbling in big data, machine learning and pattern recognition for about 20 years as a personal kind of part of my research. I think that my main role here today is I also lead within UK research and innovation on infrastructure, and that includes digital infrastructure. So I'll come at the question from that focus.
Brilliant. Mark, great to have you with us. And Gavin Jackson. Gavin, please tell us all about yourself.
How far can I go back? So Gavin Jackson, I lead the business for UiPath in EMEA. UiPath is an AI and hyper automation company headquartered in New York. I spent the last 21 years at the edge of progress in technology, having spent a number of years with EMC, a number of years with VMware, most recently 4.5 years leading the business for Amazon Web Services in the region. And then today, here I am at UiPath leading EMEA as well. So great to be here, Sue.
No, brilliant, and an awesome panel to really kick off today, where we're talking about how the digital and the physical world is meeting more and more, how these systems and infrastructure is becoming so much more interconnected, global, digital, and what this future really means, particularly, I suppose, where we are right now and what we may be facing going forward. So I wanted to kick off with a broad question to all of the panelists, really, to really start the conversation. So Jacqui, perhaps we start with you, but to everybody, what does the UK's next generation infrastructure enabled future look like to you? And what do you see as the key technologies that are really going to play a role here as we move forward?
Okay, so I'll kick us off. So as you say, lockdown and the COVID-19 pandemic has really driven rapid digital transformation we see, and a really massive shift, as we've all experienced, to remote working already. So changes that we thought would take years have happened in days. And I think the digital infrastructure has responded really well, as has society. It's adapted to the new models quickly: online health consultations, food delivery services, education, and indeed the reinvention of our social life. So from my book club going online, yoga classes, and YouTube streamed Thursday nights at the National Theatre, that's just my social life. The value, I think, of the cloud technologies that have been proven, without a doubt, delivering companies with the ability to resource share and scale at really unpredicted and unexpected levels. So we've got some of the foundations. So from there, we see that the UK's next gen enabled future is one where businesses are even more digital, but by design. They're more data driven. There's more pervasive digital marketing and e-commerce, using much more automation and AI. Automation and AI designed into the process, designed into how the business runs, all of it running more in the cloud. And unfortunately, as we did see through the pandemic, exposed fundamentally to a little bit more overall, more cyber risk. Digital self-service will expand as it's more efficient, and we've discovered much more preferable for many of us as consumers. Logistics, which are fundamentally the backbone of our economy, will be underpinned with the broad use of blockchain technology, which gives us transparency, efficiency, and security, all of which have been highlighted as so necessary very recently, from healthcare supply lines to food provision and parts supply and manufacturing. I think we'll have leveraged digital transformation to help us achieve the UK's climate objectives without impacting our competitiveness, by making accelerated investments in IoT systems for smarter mobility and smarter cities, platforms for energy trading at the consumer level, advanced mobility solutions, exploiting connected cars and alternate energy supplies. So I think we do have many of the tools we need, and that the crisis has proved that much of this technology and the key tech plays lots of roles has been proven. Connectivity, Wi-Fi, broadband, clouds, many of them in different combinations, collaboration tools, things like this. But AI, automation by design everywhere. IoT and blockchain all got proven application today. And so, particularly in this forum, we shouldn't forget that the thriving tech sector in the UK drives the development and creation of new tools and new innovation every day, quite outstandingly. So we'll probably be all right from a tools point of view. The raw tools we have today, and I think we've proven them in short order very quickly here. But the tools I don't think will be enough. We need the skills to use them. And I think we all know we've still got a huge amount to do to close the UK digital skills gap at every level and in every sector, not just the tech sector. I think it's critical that we make the UK's next generation infrastructure enabled future is one where all bits of society and all members of society can participate equally, where opportunities provided for people from all backgrounds, race, gender, geography, and all ages. Basically, we need to build an inclusive next generation digital future for the UK. The public response to the recent death of George Floyd has highlighted, right, how important it is that we address this urgently as society. We've got to focus on skills, access to training, education, and opportunity systematically if we're to make this a digitally enabled future where we've closed the skills gap and the equality and inclusivity gap in the UK. But we've got the tools, we've got the innovation, we've the tech industry that can do it. It's not perfect, but we've got the building blocks, but we've got to address skills, would be my view. So about where we go and where we are.
Great, Jacqui, a brilliant vision, and we'll get on to in a minute. How do we get there then? What are the steps we need to take? But before that, Mark, over to you. Would be great to have your view of what this future looks like to you, and where you think we are right now, and what's going to be key.
So I'm going to echo quite a number of the messages Jacqui put out, but from a very different perspective. So I'm looking at this from the perspective of the research sector. So that's the public sector funded research sector in the UK. Over the last year, 18 months, we've been doing some work putting together a potential roadmap for infrastructure investments, and that includes digital infrastructure, but goes beyond that. One thing that came out of that piece of work is every single research sector is becoming increasingly dependent on digital technologies. So whether that's big data in particle physics and astronomy, something we're quite used to. In structural biology, they rely on very complex images from cryo-electron microscopy, huge amount of data, very difficult to analyze, requires a lot of compute power. But even in the arts and humanities now, collections are being digitized and researchers are mining those collections using digital techniques, machine learning techniques. So the whole research sector is becoming increasingly dependent on digital technologies, and that's only going to increase. And we have some sense of the potential rate of increase in that data explosion. So what we've been doing is looking at the needs of the research sector. Now there are a number of areas. Obviously, you have to cover AI, whatever AI-enabled research means. That covers all sorts of areas. Some parts of the research sector relies on high-performance computing, and I believe that's the topic of the next session. So we're looking to see how the UK can take the steps towards the exascale, and also the general idea of processing data through high-throughput computing. So whether that's cloud-based or public-private cloud-based. So what we're trying to do is look to see how we can provide the research sector with those resources through our infrastructure. And the opportunity we have at the moment is to do that in a coherent way, because we are looking at the whole picture rather than from individual research councils. So I actually think in terms of technologies, and we know how to take the next steps, but that really is kind of only part of the story. And I think the thing that could hold us back, as Jacqui mentioned, is the skills deficit. Do we have the actual enough skilled people to exploit that infrastructure? So there's no point the UK having the best research-focused digital infrastructure in the world if we don't have the people to utilise it. The other thing I would just want to highlight, it's also really how we connect our research sector into business and innovation, and particularly how we start to embed some of these technologies into SMEs, which I think is particularly challenging. So as I say, I think the research sector is really just increasingly reliant on digital technologies, and what we really need is the right structures, perhaps within academia and research, to actually enable skills to be developed and create a pipeline through research. And I think Jacqui said a really important point. It's no point doing that, say, within just a few universities. We have to really have access to the talent pool in the UK in the broadest sense. So that really means having activities that really touch all parts of the UK and all parts of our society to actually build up that skill base that we're going to need. And I think in terms of COVID-19, I think we are going to come out of it. The world will change, but some of the world will look the same. I think it's an opportunity for the UK. I think it's an opportunity for the UK really to take leadership in kind of the whole digital sector, but that's going to require a lot of planning. And again, skills is at the heart of everything.
Great, Mark. Thank you so much. And already a lot of overlap and messages that seem to be resonating. So great to explore later. But before we do that, Gavin Jackson for UiPath. Thanks so much for being with us, Gavin. How is this a vision that you share as well, or what do you see as the future, and from your point of view, the technologies that are foremost in your mind about how we realize this?
Well, I guess not surprisingly, there's gonna be some echo in what we've just heard from our first two speakers. But to rehash a much used phrase from Mark Andreessen, software is eating the world and continues to do so even during these unprecedented times. In fact, I think the software has been a defining factor of these unprecedented times, and I think that there's a lot of research that's gone on that shows that we've done something like 2 years worth of digital transformation in the space of 3 months. So you can see that really, every industry, every company, every part of society in some ways been redefined and reshaped in the form of software. And actually now the data is starting to back that up as well. So if you look at the number of jobs that exist in the world right now in the technology sector or technology-based jobs, 60% of those, more than 60% of those, are now outside of the tech industry. So they don't actually work for tech companies. So it shows that, you know, manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies and telecommunication companies and retailers and everything, every company across every industry is using technology as a way to gain competitive advantage or to keep up with current trends. And indeed, you know, some of the trends that we're hearing from companies like Microsoft in a recent survey is that more apps will be built in the next 3 years than in the last 40 combined. So 500 million apps will be built to 2023. So there's an avalanche of activity defined by software. And I think that one of the really kind of key elements that these times in COVID times have really kind of highlighted is that I think that there's going to be a lot more emphasis on the sharing economy, on research groups, as we've just heard, sharing first principles and good tech being an investable element of the economy. So technologies and software that are built for you know, ecological, economical, health, societal benefits as being first principle attributes. So I think that is a general trend. If I'm going to just dig a little into some of the technology trends or the important technologies I think is important for the UK. Obviously, the cloud will continue to be the factory, right? The overwhelming horsepower to build all these applications, an abundance of resources for every builder to tap into with a credit card and a dream. But I think that cloud will also now extend to the edge, and I think that we'll start to really kind of realize the promise of connected things, whether that be the sort of promise of cars or robots and drones or smart cities or you name it. Right across the board, I think that will start to become reality. So we're going to need the infrastructure and the connectivity infrastructure that the country needs to really kind of profit from that particular trend. I think the hyper-automation is going to be a really significant part of how, you know, Britain stays ahead and differentiates itself. So freeing people to innovate more and not waste time on undifferentiated work. So the kind of principle of it, if it can be automated, then automate it. And if you're building something new, then you have it be born automated. You know, these are principles that I think we're going to have to start to really kind of drill in to our business leaders. We've mentioned a couple of times today already the AI infusion, and I think we're taking great leaps in AI. But I don't think yet we've crossed the Rubicon in terms of the infusion into everything. So every part of life and society is often being infused in some way by a learning algorithm that is going to improve the quality of life or the buying behaviors or drug discovery and augmenting sort of human machine workforce. I don't think we've crossed that Rubicon yet. There's work to do there. I think that Britain can play a leading role there. I think something a little controversial, Sue, is the rise of platforms. It's a thorny one because platforms often create a kind of a debate of how much value they create for themselves. But what I think we need to do is to see past that and understand that actually that those platforms are unlocking and unleashing the potential of others. And the amount of value, trillions of dollars worth of value, has been created on the back of platforms, and the abundance of these technologies being available to anybody who has a will and anybody who has the imagination to build something amazing. And I think again, platforms will help us learn more. They'll help us innovate faster. They'll help research groups to collaborate and share to make faster progress. So I think the platforms, whilst they do create a lot of value for the platform owners, they are unleashing unbelievable amounts of value for everybody. And then the last thing I'd say, as a kind of a general development that we need to figure out in this country, probably around the world, is the democratization of technologies and app development in particular. Because if there's going to be more software created in the next 3 years than in the last 40, then to coin a well-known quote from the movie Jaws, we're going to need a bigger boat. And that bigger boat comes in the form, I think, of citizen developers and people like you and I that don't have engineering degrees, computer engineering degrees, to be able to contribute somehow to the building of applications and improving the quality of our lives. And if you think about that for a second, not only does that help to sort of accelerate the speed of progress, but it's also going to make us a lot more inclusive. You know, where technology jobs have really been the position for the elite or for graduates of technology. If you're going to lower the barrier to entry, and if you're going to enable more people with low, no code development skills, then more of society can contribute, and it becomes a lot more inclusive. So I think that these are some of the areas that I think are going to be important as we progress, as we come out of COVID.
It's amazing to hear all your perspectives to kick us off, because there's some really big key issues here really that we have to talk about. The kind of democratization of technology. You talked about the platforms, Gavin. The market is changing, right? I've been in this industry for more years probably than I'm willing to admit, but the immense change we've seen even in the last couple of years, and then the immense change we've seen even since March this year in terms of digital acceleration, the importance of not leaving anyone behind, as Jacqui was saying, but also of getting the science right, getting the research right, getting the collaboration right. But I get a sense that we also need to think about how we accelerate this, how we move forward. Is that a sense that you all have, that we need to be moving a bit more with pace? I'm thinking, Mark, in terms of your how do we really accelerate where we need to be heading? Is there any, particularly in terms of collaboration, bringing industry and academia and research together? What is key there to really move us forward, do you think?
That's a very good and very, very difficult question.
Sorry.
Yeah, you give me a hard one there. I think there are certainly areas within the research sector that engage well with academia. Where academia engages well with industry. But typically this is with the big industrial players, the players that have that embedded expertise. So if you look at a company like Rolls-Royce or GSK, they have a lot of in-house expertise and can engage with academia and work very effectively on cutting-edge kind of research-based digital acceleration of industry. So I mean, there are a number of good examples actually that we've seen during the COVID crisis, where really pushing at the edges of research. So talking about drug discovery, there's a lot of work going on there. Really interesting. Again, that will come up in the context of supercomputing. But it's really only the big players that can actually engage in that kind of research-led innovation. Let's say research-led innovation. I think the challenge we have is how we can actually connect academia and academic research to smaller companies. And I mentioned it before. Of course, most of our companies are SMEs. So how do we actually give those companies competitive advantage? So within STFC, we have a number of small initiatives, but they really are small scale. And we can work with tens and hundreds of SMEs maybe, but that's small. It's scaling up that connection between academia and SMEs, which I think is the big challenge. And I think we need to accelerate that. But I don't have an instant solution to doing that. It's a very hard challenge, but it is critical to I think to the future economy of the UK.
Yeah, I was about to use a term which I've heard so much recently in the last couple of weeks of there is no silver bullet, but it's true, there is no silver bullet to that. But I know particularly at TechUK, that's something that we're very passionate to help with as well, and somewhere we should be doing more together. But it kind of leads me on to a question, Jacqui. I was going to ask you around, I suppose leaving no one behind, but thinking about this from a business point of view, a society point of view, absolutely, and I completely agree with you on that, and that's something we need to be doing more about. From a business point of view, though, and you talked about a lot of different technologies, from AI, blockchain, all the way up, and to me, all these technologies have a role to play. But how do we get businesses to understand the potential of what these technologies mean? Because it's a long list of technologies, and they may be thinking, well, where do I even start, or how do I even get involved in this next generation infrastructure future? What does it mean for me? How do we sell this to businesses? As you need to be thinking about not just, I love Gavin's phrase of I've got a credit card and cloud and a dream, but how do I implement these technologies for my organization? Where would you start? What steps do businesses need to be thinking about?
Well, there are lots, and I do think the recent environment, COVID-19, the pandemic, has really been an enormously positive example of tech for good in many, many ways. companies have worked out how they could service their clients. Adversity is the mother of all invention, as they say, but it has really been an enormous catalyst. But I think as an industry, what we have to do is demonstrate that value. We had a really compelling need to use it. People saw the value very quickly. And I think sometimes we spend too long talking about the technology and not enough time talking about what it enables. So who cares how blockchain works? I don't, and I've worked in the industry for 30 years. But I do care about the fact that it allows supply chains to be flexible and secure if you're trading medicines, or you need to move from one supplier for PPE to another, right? That was a really great example. Could we have convinced lots of different healthcare companies, everybody in that supply chain, to very quickly adopt an electronic-based supply chain based on blockchain technology before? No. Did it take very long? Through the pandemic globally? No, it didn't. Because we knew what the problem was we needed to fix, and people felt it urgently. So I think we've got to take some of the benefit of the urgency and demonstrate it. I mean, Gavin made a really great point about platforms, right? Platforms is almost the new black. Everybody is wanting to talk about platforms, and platforms are only useful if they're enabled. So we have to think about things, to your point about who wins. We've got to talk about the circular economy. How does an energy trading platform or a smarter city benefit all of the citizens? How does everybody buy into it? Where do the value pools accrue to the user? If you've got an EV car and you can sell some of that energy back to the grid, there's an economic value. So I think, Sue, what we've got to do is help businesses and government and citizens understand where the value is for them to adopting these things. It's not inevitable. We love it, right? We work in this industry, but we've got to work out who it enables and who it supports.
Yeah.
And rather than sound like a stock record, for which I apologise, it is still about skills, and it is about digital education at every level in every sector. We have to educate boards on the things that they have to be bothered about, the new competitors, the new advantages, the flexible supply chains that can be enabled, the cyber risks that they have to be aware of, that it's different now. So we have to start at the board, we have to start at the second level managers, but we've also got to work with all of the workforce. But for businesses, we've got a lot of work to do, I think, about proven business cases versus proven technologies. And I think we've got to work about economic value pools and demonstrate that it doesn't lift one, it lifts all. Yeah,
all boats rise.
All boats rise, absolutely.
All boats
rise if we do this right. And if I can, I'm going to shut up, I know. But on Mark's point, I think again, on that scientific collaboration and research, I think, again, the pandemic demonstrated the value of doing that. So the UK actually, as a nation, was the first to join the high performance compute COVID-19 consortium that IBM established with the White House and many other companies. Microsoft, Google, everybody joined. We started it. But everybody worked there together. And I read an article by Dario Gill, who is our head of research globally, yesterday, talking about a science reserve corps almost. How do we build a model where we've got army reservists and people come when there's an emergency? How do we build a model that connects people more frequently? But we do it, I think, to Gavin's point, in a cloud-based way, so there's access. So STFC has some great resources. If it was all enabled through a cloud, then people don't need to be big to join in. IBM's quantum network is a great example, right? Future tech. So Mark, I know, would be interested in some of that stuff. But that quantum network, we deliberately put on the cloud. So we've got thousands of people, researchers, developers, academics, students, engaging today on that network, having access to high-level technology to do innovation and research. So again, I think, adversity was the mother of all invention. We had a real need to do it. But I think the real challenge and the real opportunity, I think, for us all, Mark, is how do we keep that momentum going, use some of the use cases of things we've managed to do together collectively and harness that for future, but build out those networks and those connections so that it's not once in an emergency, it's much more sustained. I think for the UK, it would be fantastic. So that's my view.
No, I think, Mark, I'm sure you would agree with that, but be interested, how do we keep that momentum going? And also, I think with my TechUK hat on as well, thinking about how do you move the momentum from not just the research, but the actual commercialization and then the deployment and adoption of the technologies that are coming through, the amazing work that you guys are doing. So how do we put the kind of, as well as the R in R&D, the D in R&D as well, how do we get that right?
Again, you're asking me the difficult questions.
I know, I'm sorry, Mark.
Well, I think it's a very, I mean, Jackie made a very good point, actually. I mean, this collaboration around HPC and COVID-19, that didn't come out of nowhere. We've been, certainly over the last few years, collaborating more extensively with the US, starting from connections within our national laboratories. A lot of the research in the US goes on within their national laboratories. Of course, we also work with companies like IBM, in fact. So those connections were made. So when a particular challenge came along, we were already talking. Everybody was already talking to each other, and we actually managed to put that in place very, very quickly. So we're incredibly agile, which is unusual. And I think the building blocks, and it's that connectivity and everybody working together and talking together in a collaborative way, and that's the thing we need to maintain after this crisis goes away. That will be one challenge. The second question, how we turn the D part of R&D, that's about people. Again, so I've seen so many cases where, certainly out of my research area, particle physics, for example, people have a great idea. Researchers have a really good idea that they've got some tool they've developed addressing a particle physics problem or something like that, where it could be commercialized, but that either they don't have the skills to do it, or they don't have a pool of people that can actually work with them to actually develop that idea. Because we in terms of certainly software engineering, it's at the moment it is not as valued as it should be within the research sector. So I think that's one part of really, unfortunately, that's the slow part of actually trying to plug these skills gaps. It's really valuing software development as a part of an essential part of the academic discipline. So it's really having that capacity in those people to actually do the D bit, because it's actually quite hard for the R part, the researchers, to suddenly shift all of their activities into development. So you need capacity, and again, capacity is about people. Absolutely. And I don't have a solution. I wish we had there's something we need to address, and we need to know. We need to address that.
Yeah, and
that has to be done at a very high level within government.
And also exploring how industry can help with that as well. So I'm going to turn to Gavin now. And I was about to say give him a hard question, but that I don't want to worry you, Gavin. I suppose I was just thinking about actually, does this really come down to, as Mark's point, and as Jacqueline has said before, it's skills, it's people. It's actually, is this a technology issue at all? It sounds like, do we have the tools, we have the technologies, it's how we explain this to people, it's how we get boards excited. I'm just wondering from your work and your, working with customers and working with the industry, how do you kind of get people thinking about this deployment and adoption of these technologies? How do you get that right? Is it use cases? Is it explaining it in a business way? And also, where do you think we are on that? And do you think that the COVID situation, crisis rather, may have changed boards and business leaders thinking about what they may need to invest in the future? Or do you think people are still on course for looking at these technologies and what they may mean to their businesses?
I love that question. So I think to create the right environment here for what would be a systemic kind of a playing field for us all to work on and get this right. To get to the solution, we have to admit that there's a problem, and the problem is in various different sort of aspects of it. And to be honest, I think we've had a decade of what I would refer to as being head fakes or a lack of conviction when it comes to really kind of getting ahead and executing on this sort of much maligned subject of digital transformation. And you've only got to look at what's been achieved in the last three months because of the urgency of now, or the mother of all necessities, as we heard from earlier, where we've built brand new industries because we had to and we wanted to. We built hospitals. We've got new skills that we didn't have before. When you have the conviction and when you have the urgency, it's amazing actually what can be achieved. When it comes to sort of the general deployment of technologies and how we enable and empower and provide the playing field for the UK to prosper, I do think that there's some big, spiky challenges, and the conviction is definitely one of them. But I think that lack of conviction can come down to a number of different things. The first is, I think we need to embark on a sort of a re-education, if you will, of some of our leadership principles. How we run companies, how we think about it. I think that there's a lot of fear still from large and established companies who sort of fear the speed of change. They fear the big bang disruptors that are coming in, but they sort of prefer to hunker down and to stick with what they know. I think that coming out of these times and what's been proven is that actually when you do have urgency and you do have conviction, you can achieve the digital sort of footprint that actually every company is going to need. So I definitely think that there is something to say for company conviction, executive leadership conviction, and wanting to do this, after a decade of head fakes. But I also think that there is a role to play for governments as well. So oftentimes when the subject of digital comes up, there's mixed messages. The tax system, for example, doesn't always necessarily encourage the use of digital transformation technologies for such things as research and development. So there is actually a research and development tax incentive from the government, which I applaud and welcome. But actually, I believe it's still the case. I need to do my homework. I believe it's still the case that that only applies where you are. So, for instance, if you want to innovate, you have to go buy some servers, and then when you buy those servers and you own them as assets, then it's a tax deductible item up to a third of the cost. And it's not true for things like the usage of cloud technologies, which is disproportionately a much more productive innovation engine than sort of buying and owning servers these days. So I think that we need to figure out how we reduce the barriers to entry, reduce the barriers to R&D, educate our leaders, provide the right tax incentives. And then finally, when it comes to the education part that's been talked about a lot, some of the issues right through from the early stages of education is that oftentimes technology moves so fast that it's really difficult for the teachers to keep up with the trends. So I think that actually this is a role now that the technology industry can play, and great voices like TechUK can play in finding a common ground where there's no sort of individual biases, that we're all aligned to the progress of the nation and the progress of our people and the progress for Great Britain, but we're not sort of championing, if you will, our own singular cause. And I think that comes down to us contributing more time and more content to help teachers really stay ahead and teach young people the skills that they need to contribute to our society.
Thank you. Jacqui, did you want to come in on there?
Yes, only because I really agree. So particularly on the areas of schools, and particularly on where we're all aligned for the general skills as opposed to a local personal requirement or a particular corporate bias. I had started a program in 2011 called PTech, which is Pathways to Technology. We started it in the US in generally quite deprived areas with very low graduation rates, very low employment rates. And it's now in 24 countries around the world, including the UK. Wow. 3 schools in Leeds, more to come in Scotland and in the West. But that's a real academia, industry, and tech industry coming together program. So we provide a lot of the structure. It is a program we sponsor, but we do it with now, I think, 600 other industry partners, not just IT industry partners, but for example, we have them in Dublin, and our and one of our partners there is Irish Water, another is Irish Life, because they're big employers in the general area. And that is the program. It's called Pathways to Technology. It helps disadvantaged communities generally with low employment rates. We give them technical qualifications, employability skills, understanding the modern workplace. We don't think that in the future everybody's going to need a degree. I think to that everybody access to all. There was blue collar and white collar. We call this new collar work, and we think enabling in this three-way partnership And today I say we've got over 200 schools, more than 120,000 students around the world. But it's the mentoring graduate-ready students who've got mentoring, site visits, paid internships with local employers that makes that a real pathway for ongoing skills development. They learn the skills of how to learn, the skills of how technology works, not the technology, not the particular tool. It's we bring out employment-ready individuals. And we've actually, because of the COVID-19 thing, it accelerated us doing open PTech. So anybody who wants to go look, to your point, there's education enablement for everybody. So for teachers, for returners to work, people who want to go on that path. So that's at the school level. It's a fantastic program, and it's done with many partners. So Cisco and lots of companies participate in that. And lots of people have graduated 4 times the graduation rate. Many of them work for IBM and other companies around the world today. If a very real, very different demographic. And I think this is one of the ways we address that skills for all piece and the future proof. But we've also got to remember it's not just the teachers and the new students. There's another program we do again in partnership with lots of people called Skills Build, and that provides online digital skills training, education, certification to anybody: veterans transitioning from the armed forces, migrants, refugees, women returning to work, youth people, anybody. And again, we provide that content, but we do it with partners. So Salute My Job is a veterans company that uses it, or City Gateway. And I think more of that private-public academic partnership, to your point, will really build us a set of people in the UK who can use, engage with, and drive forward our digital economy. And it has to be all of those 3 things. And right now we've seen a real change in our workforce because of the changing working patterns. So we need to not just do people at schools, we do need to do that, but we've got to reskill the existing workforce rapidly, because this rate and pace of change, I think, has come on us so much more quickly. It's just so important. I think it's the critical thing that all of us, to Gavin's point, need to get together around. Government needs to do a lot of things. This can be part of it. We need better broadband everywhere. If everyone's going to work remotely, we need to accelerate 5G and access to technology. It can't just be in the major cities. COVID-19 proved to us people's working patterns can change, the nature of work can change, the automation helps, right, Gavin, as we said. But only if you've got some connectivity that means you can access it remotely, not just in London and not just in Manchester. So yes, I agree completely with there's many interventions we need government to do about the tax system, the infrastructure. It's not perfect, but we've got all the building blocks, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And Jacqui, you've actually preempted my very final question. We've got about two minutes left. So I was going to ask you all, what's the one thing that we can do to get ready for this future? You know, the title of the session, are we ready for the next generation infrastructure driven future? So what's the thing we should be thinking about and doing right now? So Jacqui, if you don't mind, I think I think you summed that up perfectly, but perhaps final words to Gavin and then to Mark really quickly. Gavin, to you first, what's the one thing that would be on the top of your list?
So the one thing on the top of my list would be to continue the level of urgency and conviction that we've had through these exceptional times, through normal times. I followed the story on the BBC yesterday about when you set a goal for clean energy, for example, and now Britain is coal-free in the UK. If you set a goal and you apply all your resources to it, you can achieve it. And there's been great urgency in that. There's been great urgency over the last 3 months, and we should continue that momentum, and we'll achieve wonderful things if we all align on that urgency.
Great, thanks, Gavin. Mark, last word to you. What's
your
final message?
I'm not going to say anything particularly new here. And I think it's really convincing the policymakers that this is critical for the future of the UK economy. If government were to set an ambitious goal around digital transformation of the UK, that could then be backed up, through government departments, industry, academia, and industry. So I agree with that setting an ambitious goal, and then actually having a coherent plan to actually deliver on that goal. And that not an easy thing to do, but if there's enough top level impetus put into the system, that's the kind of thing that could really change, turn the UK around in digital technology.
Wonderful. Well, that's unfortunately the end of our time together in the panel. We've covered so much. We've covered the importance of momentum, the importance of pace, the importance of the technologies themselves, the importance of bringing businesses on and proving the business case, and skills, and bringing everyone behind this journey, bringing everyone along with us, and the importance of making sure we make sure all boats rise. So there's so much more we could have discussed there today. So thank you for my panel. Thank you to Gavin Jackson from UiPath, Jacqui, Davey from IBM, Mark Thomson from the Science and Technologies Facilities Council. So if you have the correct pass, you can now move to the Q&A session of this panel, which is on the CogX platform, where we'll be answering some of the questions that have come through and exploring more with our panel. So please do go to the breakouts there. But if you are leaving us now, sorry, that starts at 11, so in about 10-15 minutes. But we will be back here at 12 o'clock for a panel on supercomputing in the UK and how do we get supercomputing right for the UK, with speakers from HPE, the University of Edinburgh, and led by Alison Kennedy from the Hartree Centre. So look forward to seeing you back here at midday for the panel on supercomputing.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.